back, everyone, to the Corporate Sustainability Education channel. We are your weekly education podcast, and we're powered by the Southern Sustainability Partnership. Now, one of the things that we always intended to do when we set up the podcast was to champion innovation. And in this podcast, we're delighted to showcase innovation at its very best and in the form of a green brick. Now, we're not going to get into that just yet. We're going to introduce you to the people behind it. And so we're absolutely delighted to be joined by Ben Gibbons, who is from GreenBrick Ventures CIC. Ben, we're really pleased to have you join us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Oh, you're welcome. So you've called yourself GreenBrick Ventures and set yourself up as a CIC organisation. So before we get into the product itself, can you tell us a bit about the humans behind this?
Yeah, please. So it's not just me by any stretch. So I'm the founder and began this all last March 2020. Connor Winters, the co-founder and kind of in charge of operations, COO. And then we also have Ella Fennick, who's a design engineer, who's really taking the lead of the whole design process, from prototype through to some of the technical collaboration happening to make sure that this brick passes the regulations and things like that. And then beyond just the kind of core team, we're really only doing what we're doing because we're embedded in this amazing support network. So I want to say briefly, we are allowed to set up and run our workshop by Highmead Farm, which is a therapy farm in Dorset, who just have us, don't charge us workshop rent as well, which is huge for a startup like us. And then we're really lucky to be able to partner with the National Composite Centre and the National Physical Laboratory, who've been incredibly supportive in bringing some of their expertise and experience to what we're trying to do. So we have a great team, but we're a small part of the whole operation already, even though we're still relatively young.
It sounds like you've got a very exciting team that you're working with, but also I think you're doing the right thing. You're having these other organisations behind you. So that sounds very sensible, and I'm sure they're very excited to be involved with it as well. The essence is really quite exciting. The essence behind your product is to take throwaway plastic and breathe new life into it, which is obviously a very topical thing. And you've chosen to do it in the form of what you call a green brick. So why have you shone a spotlight particularly on the construction sector? And we've got to ask, why a brick?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And why a brick, I'm going to pin, because we can return to some of the design issues with bricks and where we're taking it. But that's a very, very prescient question, I think. So we were really interested in building materials for a couple of reasons. I think the main thing to say is that it's an enormous, if our priority is recycling plastic and making sure that it doesn't end up in marine environments, then we want to find reuse pathways which are scalable as possible, and that means that most marine kind of plastic leakage happens in developing countries. So we're really interested in what kind of reuse pathways we can support and facilitate and kind of push in those environments. So you can do an enormous amount with plastic, and any strengthening of the sector is a positive. As an example, if we set up workshops and we could create benches, which is something that we can create right now, and that's an amazing kind of way to reuse plastic. If they end up being like an artisan bench market, that you might have a workshop kind of being able to push products into a specific space, but if you have 5 workshops, people don't need that many. We wanted something which needs to use an enormous amount of material in terms of volume and mass, and yet which everyone kind of needs. So, you know, if we're able to use a really high amount of household plastic waste as what's called the phase material, the kind of general material within which other things might be added, and then successfully use that in a housing environment. For me, that's a huge key to scaling. I mean, hopefully all over the world. So we could also see people, we're not the absolute first people to be doing it, you know, so we could begin to see plastics being used in the construction industry, but just not quite in ways that we felt from experiences in Nepal, in the development sector, which is my background. Other companies might not have kind of scale it like routes to market, which are that well suited for the kind of infrastructure and the kind of environments that we're really interested in pushing this into. So, you know, we've kind of adapted the technology slightly, and we're trying to push it in a slightly new direction to make sure that it meets the needs of the specific people that we most want to build with, you know. So these are people that kind of build predominantly 1- and 2-story dwellings themselves. Most people are self-builders. And so, yeah, it was a real opportunity, I think, seeing that the technology's developed to the point now where this might be possible, but there's a kind of large number of people that aren't quite being served by the solutions that are already out there.
What you aim to look at is something that has real momentum. So there's always, you know, there's a continual need for it quite quickly, which means that you can actually find new homes for this waste very quickly as well as the need for it develops. But certainly once it does, you're going to get some great momentum there. So yeah, it's a very, you know, that's a great way to market, really. So how are you moving it forward? Do you have any finance or funding in place?
Yeah, I mean, that's the heart of any startup, isn't it? The funding question. So we got it going with a business loan, you know, we had an amazing partner, YTKO, a kind of startup loan company, affiliated financer who kind of allowed us to get the initial equipment in the workshop, and we're really in the middle of discussions. It's a little bit too early to talk too much about the details at this point, but we have been approached by some private funders, and we're also co-applying for some government grants, and there's 1 or 2 international funders who we're in discussions with. So we're kind of at this interesting point where we're very much operating on the tightest possible budget you could imagine, but we're optimistic, and it feels like an exciting time, because if the design process goes well and we really have the second version of the prototype kind of performing in the way that we think it will, access to slightly larger funding is possible. We can see how that would happen in a way that when you start off on that journey, so for us that was only 12 months ago, you really have no clue how on earth that money's going to come. I want to be open with, you know, having no idea when the journey gets going, because you know it's going to need a lot of money. Yeah, it's an exciting time, but we still have a fairly novice answer to that in the sense of a business loan that's got us to this point.
I think, you know, you're quite right. And if we'd have had this conversation a few years with Elon Musk, he'd have been saying he didn't know where the money was going to come from either. And I think with the different things he's got going on, he probably still has that conversation. So obviously,
Yeah.
you know, you've created the brick, you're going to create something from it that you can then push to other people. Is there anything out there that's being trialed at the moment, or is that what you're working on?
I think the short answer is no. We're really in the design phase right now. We're in conversations with very specific communities that we're looking at trialing this in first. That's not just with the NGO partners, that they would be what we're calling the delivery partners. local NGOs have really good capacity to develop the skills needed in the kind of local people we want to work with. So we don't want to come in and assume a lot of cultural knowledge, assume too much about people's context with a 2 to 4 week kind of training program. We're going to need long-term partners, and so we're really lucky in the sense that that kind of background prep work is happening at a really good pace. We're able to talk with an enormous amount of self-builders that we really wouldn't otherwise have access to. But if you are looking for a GreenBrick branded home out there, no, that's coming. So please wait on that for a few months.
A more sustainable world is huge now. Of course, it's international, not just in the UK. And you and your team have definitely taken it upon yourselves to embrace this in a more international way. So when you've alluded to, countries that may need this type of thing, where in particular are you talking about?
Yeah, there are 3 countries in particular where we're talking with people most. Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and Indonesia. Indonesia in particular has the highest estimated amount of plastic leakage into the oceans, just in terms of population density nearest to the coast. And the recycling infrastructure that they have there. So we'd love to set up recycling workshops there. This whole thing got going based on work that Connor and I were doing in Nepal. So we're still lucky to be talking with people out there who help us understand how this would look operationally in a bit more detail. And so, our whole dream was always and still is, to be back there in the places, in the exact communities where we were working, but this time with a little bit more of a tangible like technological support system to some of the problems that communities out there were facing. But I think that's ever so slightly in the midterm future. So for now, Mozambique and Zimbabwe and Indonesia.
It's taking the product itself direct to the supply chain. So it's where there's a need for it. I mean, in this case, it's supply chain we wish we didn't have, but we certainly do. There's so much waste plastic, and it's actually quite sad to think that the countries where the waste is being produced the most is ending up in countries that didn't start it in the first place. But yes, it's interesting to see that that a company could actually take the product to market where their supply chain is. I mean, if we look at the construction industry in the UK, obviously it's a massive part of the British economy, and recessions are actually forecasted in a way as when we go into a recession and as we come out of a recession can often be modelled on how the construction industry is doing. Do you ever foresee a market for your brick here? Have you had conversations with developers here?
We've had a few, and I would love to imagine, in a few years, things a little bit closer to home, being made out of products that we're involved in making. I want to put one qualifier on that. The strengths of plastic, the things that it's turned out, in this process, becoming a plastic processor, reprocessor, dealing with the material every day, it has incredible properties which we're looking to exploit. They're not really the ones that you see in single-use plastic. And the whole, I think, idea here is that plastic as a material is amazing. It's just, all of the reasons why it's good are also exactly the reasons why it's bad for using for 7 minutes on average as a shopping bag. We're used to seeing it in incredibly flimsy contexts because it's 0.5 millimeter thick or whatever a plastic bag is, but it's incredibly strong. Its impact strength is higher than bricks. It doesn't shatter. it can be molded into the fact that you can mold it is just a game changer when it comes to trying to, you know, push innovation forward. You don't just have to have a square. You can create shapes that might mechanically work a little bit more effectively. So it has a lot of strengths which we would love to kind of also use in a UK market. The qualifier that I want to put on it is, you know, we don't see this being a product that's appropriate for like large scale, large developments. It's one of the kind of key parts of our design brief is that if you look at any one-story dwelling and, you know, most smaller houses, you don't really need the compressor strength that the brick has. There just isn't a load going through it to necessarily warrant a material that's really which really can take a lot of weight. If we're competing with a brick in terms of that raw strength, we'll definitely lose. Plastic might hold up well against treated timber in most contexts, but you know, that's more of a US thing, isn't it? Anyway, we're very much safe, and so we should be with our brick constructions. So in the right context, particularly thinking about eco cabins, smaller dwellings, and self builds, yeah, we would love that. That might be, you know, a year or two away still.
There is a company in Dorset that are involved in renewable energy, and they have gone into the sort of home market in terms of garden homes, and they're very spectacular and they're hugely popular. I mean, they have work, you know, going forward 2 years or so. And of course, they've got the Tesla, you know, solar energy, they've got solar on the roof, that kind of thing. You know, so really, there's a huge market for that sort of thing. And I think, you know, when you say about the UK market and talking to developers, I guess I would say never, because you know, they'll need to watch entrepreneurs like you, see how you go with the types of products that you're working with, and maybe take something from that, because maybe how they make it now isn't sustainable. They will run out of certain materials in the future. So I think it, you know, it all sort of becomes quite interesting as to what's going on now and how they can look at the ways that they will build in the future. But I think it's interesting to see how your type of product will work. And then, you know, these companies will have to, you know, they'll have to be looking at it. I'm sure that they will in some ways. So
it's kind of you to say. One thing which I think is interesting when we're dealing with developing economies, we actually don't really want to be stressing too much the sustainable credentials of the material, the fact that it's from plastic waste, because they're also what we call aspirational economies, that, you know, hard-earned money needs to be associated with that more affluent future, and the sustainability part of that is it might be a small thing, but it's maybe not the thing to put in the absolute foreground, even though that's the whole reason why we're doing this. In the UK market, at least, you know, we have incredibly strong interest and motivation of people that just want to be involved and be part of the solution. So one thing which, you know, we would love to push, we can, you know, if people were willing to pay for it, you know, you can make cabins out of entirely, you know, marine collected plastic litter, not 100%, but as the base material. You know, people, you can look at this type of plastic's really difficult to recycle, but potentially if we use it in this way and we, you know, kind of configure it in the right way, you know, we could make that the base material for your cabin there, and that kind of slightly more tailor-made side of it, because people really care about where things come from. They care about knowing that they're part of the solution and not the problem. That has a little bit of potential here too, which it might not at the moment in other markets. So you're dead right to say, like, we should be watching the space there.
the thing with plastic is the reason it took off like it did is its durability and its strength. But unfortunately, it then became are, you know, it then became what was wrong with it many years down the line is that how do we get rid of this plastic because it's almost indestructible. So, you know, it's great for this, for what you're talking about, of course, because of its strength. But also, I think we've found that where you've got countries like the UK, European countries, America, whatever, there's so much legislation and so much red tape about actually moving anything forward that so many great things don't often ever come to market. But when you go to these developing countries, there's much less sort of red tape and things that you have to go through. So innovation and things can really come to market that much quicker and be embraced that much quicker, which means that these countries are where we should be looking at things for the future because they're moving forward. In a lot of African countries have really embraced renewable energy, solar energy. I mean, obviously they've got the great conductor for it because they've got the continual sun. But you know, they've been able to say, yes, that's a good idea, go for it if we can help pay for it. Whereas, you know, things can take years and even decades or never come to market here. So I think the way that you're going is, you know, watch this space there really. So
You're right. I think there's a much less inertia. Maybe sometimes people in developing markets, if it solves the problem, it solves the problem. You know, they're the leapfrog solutions which have bypassed, you know, a lot of hoops that we've had to jump through. I'll say, like, when it comes to, you know, things like fire eggs and safety things, we absolutely love the context of the EU. You know, even in the US, it's easier, you know, to pass a lot of the fire regulations. We'd like to pass it all in the UK before exporting it. It's, you know, people will live in this. It's their lives. So it's nice because at the moment we're able to take and learn from the standards that, you know, we have here, but also kind of being customers that, like you said, are open to technology often more so than, you know, some of the markets here.
now, if you look at a traditional brick, obviously you put anything on something else or join it to something else, you have to adhere it to each other. We obviously know that in what we do in the UK. How do you adhere the product to each brick to each brick?
Yeah, great question. The great thing with having a moldable material is that there's a little bit more room for innovation on the design side of it, in the actual the way that the product looks and fits together. You know, you can't sculpt brick very effectively, but you can sculpt plastic. That means that we can use mechanical fastening methods slightly more effectively than, you know, you would be able to with, well, certainly, you know, concrete, wood, or traditional clay bricks. So we're developing like slot-in systems which can really take the load and distribute it pretty effectively as it is. I don't want to make it seem like there'll be zero chemical fastenings either. We're really keen to minimize it as much as possible. We might get pretty close to not relying on it, but we're still really, it's a great question, and we're spending quite a lot of time thinking, how much chemical do we need when we have like strong fastening methods? You know, if it was chemical, it would be something along the lines of epoxy, and things that worked well with plastics, ever so slightly different from water. But again, it's difficult because the chemical products that we're used to, you know, tying things together with, they are very energy intensive materials. So anything with cement in, you know, is a hugely energy intensive material. We're lucky in that we don't have to look at mortar at all. We don't really want to go too near materials that are as heavy in terms of carbon dioxide emissions as that. But glues aren't, you know, then they're not ideal either. So it's a great question, and yeah, we'll see exactly where it goes, but yeah, certainly slot together techniques are a lot more possible with plastic based materials.
I can see where you're coming from. Maybe we need to be smarter about how we put things together and cut out that sort of middle area, but I shouldn't worry too much right now about, you know, you say we haven't got all the answers. There's certain things we're going to have to use, because trust me, there's no organisation we've spoken to yet that has all the answers, and they've been doing it a lot longer than you have. So, you know,
Yeah.
you just have to say a step at a time. The biggest part of what we're doing is right. The rest will come. Um, I keep coming back to the UK bed, but you know, that's my experience, if you like. Here, maybe it's because of our climate. I don't know. I'm not technical on bricks, but they do have to breathe. Where you're going to be using your product, is that something that's necessary or not?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question, because I was really concerned about this for a long time as we got going. Plastic is impermeable when it comes to water, and it's not known for breathing, you know, very effectively, as everyone that has condensation issues next to their PVC windows will know. So it surprised me to learn that when you look at a kind of new generation of very sustainably designed buildings, they're often what are called sealed. They really are self-contained units. Ventilation is controlled through like specifically designed ventilation channels. So we would need to be designing ventilation spaces in the wall, and understanding how that's going to regulate both the exchange of air, which needs to circulate, which needs to change every 90 minutes to whatever it is. You know, and also moisture, and not letting things get, you know, we all know what it's like to get just drips coming off of some impermeable material. So it's something that we're thinking about quite a lot, but it doesn't have to be in the actual material itself. We can have in the wall units every, you know, X and
Yeah.
meters apart, which kind of let that process regulate itself.
Well, you know, I'm going to feel like I'm quite smart knowing this, really, but you know, in the UK we have air bricks, don't we? You know, we have to you know, let air in. So I mean, you know, there's no reason why that couldn't happen in your situation as well, really.
Yeah.
So would your team say that you are businessmen first and innovators second, or is that all of this coming new to you all?
Um, so it's all new. This is all new, and it's been an incredibly overwhelming journey because of that. We are new to this. Is my first business, our first business, setting up, and it's interesting coming from the international development sector. Sometimes that really helps. It really helps to think slightly differently about problems, and engage with our key stakeholders in certain ways. But I've also learned, and had to learn quite quickly, the specific demands that a business owner and business strategists need to think about are not always exactly the same as as NGOs, let's say. And one thing, for example, that we've had to change our views on quite strongly is when we're dealing with developing communities, let's say, because this is really entirely socially and environmentally driven. We're not really interested in profit as individual founders, except as a tool for scaling and pushing this and getting investors on board. The idea of very contractual relationships, of demanding a kind of a proportional amount of investment from communities themselves, and regulating those relationships, in business terms, that was difficult at first. We wanted to have this amazing thing that we could just, hey, look, we've got a workshop, it processes it in this way, we've got this technology. Actually, I think there's something dignifying about contractual relationships. You are a partner in a business chain, in a value chain, it's a slight hard hat that I think you wear when you're in business, which we are, and I'm certainly training myself to wear slightly more. But certainly that's the thing that we're really having to adapt to. You know, we would love to think of ourselves primarily as designers, and you know, with Ella particularly on the team, and innovators, and what we're trying to do here is develop new products. But I would say, like, a lot of the innovation that we're trying to push is not to use factories as the ultimate goal for a production company. Actually, a really scalable workshop that can, you know, you can have 100 for the price of one factory. That is what we're going for, and that's more business than it is, you know, that's operational innovation. It's not just having a key product and then you know, following other design companies and scaling it up into a factory. So we're a little bit in between. I think I'm being a little bit slippery with some of these answers, but
well, with anything new, you know, that's how you have to be. And I think that it's good to think that in the construction industry, you know, we wear hard hats, because you certainly have taken on the hardest job. You haven't said, well, look, this is already, you know, this has already been done. Multiple businesses are doing this. Let's go the easy route and just, you know, try to do the same thing. You've chosen the hardest possible route. I think one of the greatest tools that you can have when you do something like that, and you've got it in spades, is enthusiasm. I think enthusiasm and passion carries you an awful long way. And so, you know, I just know that you're going to do well, because I can tell that, you know, you've got that. You've mentioned a few times the word workshops, and I think I have to ask what you mean by that. Obviously, you're a company, you want to make a product, you want to produce a product, and then you're saying workshops. Workshops to me is where you bring in people who want to learn a new skill, they want to learn how to do something. Is that what you mean by a workshop?
yeah, thank you for picking me up on this. I must have said that word 100 times so far without explaining it. So at the moment, we have hooked up industrial electricity to a 29-foot lorry container. That is the space in which we work. And surprisingly enough, even though it's fairly contained, it's fairly small, there's room for scaling. We can actually get some bigger equipment there. What we're really looking to do is optimize and understand exactly how you can configure what machines you need, what processes you need to make a small space like that as efficient as it possibly can be. Everything can be contained there, and it can be shipped off almost as is. It will need to be hooked up to three-phase electricity in location. So it's you know, it's slightly more complicated than literally just dropping it in a location. But the transportability and the ability to reach communities with this kind of semi-industrial equipment is key to what we want to do, because a lot of the infrastructure in the areas where we're interested in working, you know, a large production space that really works purely off of massive economies of scale, it's really challenging to do that well. You need a very reliable infrastructure. You need really reliable electricity. You need you know, really well connected buyers and sellers. You need to know that you'll be selling all of your products, and that's often just not the markets that you see. Whereas something the space of a workshop, so something that is efficient, that has really good machines, that is possible to use within a small town or a large village, that's what we're going for. So when we talk about workshops, we're talking about this small space that we're trying to develop, which will contain all of the machines and will employ, you know, 6 to 10 people, but hopefully be adapted a little bit more to the environments that we're working in. Does that make sense? I appreciate that without giving you this picture of the small Hovis lorry that we're working out of, it's probably difficult exactly to picture it.
It does make sense, Ben, yes. And I think, another element that obviously I'm seeing from this is that, you know, not only you developing something, but you're taking it to the places where it can be used best, and you're actually leaving them the skills themselves to be able to do this, which is absolutely incredible. And I think when you're saying about the energy and the things that they're going to need to have that, they've taken some ownership in that, so obviously they're going to help you to, you know, to get the best of anything that they can within their area. So I think you then become a team and working together on something like this, which I think is fantastic.
Thanks. I was just going to say, you know, I would love if in 10 years' time, of course, for the company that we're creating, we want that to be big, you know, and successful. But when you look at woodworking workshops, you know, traditional, what we think of when we think of workshops that process wood, that doesn't have to be affiliated with a brand. There's not a brand of wood. It's a facility. It's a type of facility, and I think it's a massive loss if we are kind of living in a global context in which we have an abundance of this material. I know it has huge harmful consequences, so we don't want to think about it in a positive light, but it is the most available material on the planet. And if we can process it in using fairly simple machines, you know, you need to shred it up. You need to have this machine called an extruder, which heats it up to 250 degrees and uses a motor to kind of push it on a screw through an exit hole into any shape that you want. You can do incredible things with that. This could be a massive engine of local entrepreneurship in countries that could do enormous things with it. People are so entrepreneurial and they have so much drive. They just need the tools. So we really want to push this idea that, you know, hopefully we can be a part of it and a big part of pushing this forward, but it's much bigger than just our name or our company. We need to have processing spaces which are adapted to these communities. And so the idea of the workshop, which you picked up on, is just at the heart of that.
Yeah. Well, it sounds incredible, and I think the end result for the people that you're working with, you know, that they'll have these structures, I think is enough in itself to give them the drive and enthusiasm to do it. And I think that if you're in business doing anything, I think, you know, we love working in the sustainability space because it gives us a good feeling that businesses that, you know, you work with, you leave behind something better. And for you and your team, I can just imagine the huge amount of you know, feel good factor that you're going to get from doing this is your reward for your business. So yeah, it's fantastic. Obviously, you know, you've painted a picture here where you are going to need help, you are going to need enthusiasm from other people. The more people that you speak to, the more people they're going to know, and so on. If you had to put a shout out to any particular type of industry or anybody at all, who's the type of people that you would like to be in conversation with, or am I too early to ask you that question?
No, it's an incredible question, and I feel selfish answering it because there are so many daydreams that we have. I hope it's not remiss to say, but as an example of just this unbelievable support that we're already getting, it was yesterday late afternoon that we just got this incredible email from a doctor of polymer science. He just happened to have seen some of our work and just got in touch to, you know, ask if they could help or feed in. And my word, I mean, we would be so humbled by you know, any of the specialists that are coming on. They know so much more than us. It's just hopefully we can be connectors. We have the design brief. We can, you know, it's my job to match the funds and design briefs and the people, and that's really exciting. But it's going to be those specialists who have the kind of decades of experience with these really technical issues that are actually making sure that this is, you know, safe and as effective as possible and completely optimized. And so, you know, one thing which we're starting to look at, although it's just ever so slightly premature, it's just in the earlier stages, you know, we need to make sure that when we're modeling these houses, you know, if we say that it's good for one story, but what if someone tries to use it for 2 stories? We need to really understand all of the situations that might happen when it comes to using this as a building material. We need to understand exactly how we can use it structurally in the safest possible way. Just as a small example, I hope this isn't too technical, but you know, the ways in which plastic is strong, they're slightly different, and they act in different directions to the ways in which other materials are strong, like brick. And so it might be possible that this opens up new design possibilities for buildings themselves. What am I talking about here? Structural engineers and people associated with buildings. For us, that's an area, a kind of risk area that we are thinking a lot about, and it's one of those challenges that we know will be okay, but until we have everyone, you know, we have the contacts in place to make sure that we have all of the calculations and the sums and the simulations and the tests, we are not quite settled. So if there are any structural engineers out there who want to give us a call, always welcome.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, please get in touch with the guys. Ben, we'd like to thank you so much for sharing with us GreenBrick. It's been amazing to hear your story. Clearly, this is something we don't want to end here. We want to continue to talk to you, and I know our listeners will want to know how this is moving forward. You know, when you have a case study, please do share that with us. We will be adding Ben's and his team's website to the right of this podcast so that you can take a look. And you absolutely have to have a look at this Hovis van, because I just thought it was the best when I saw it. I loved it. They say how millennials like to work in quirky places. Well, you know, you've certainly got a quirky place. It looks amazing.
Thank you.
We have experienced some interference here on this Zoom meeting, which I apologise for. We have tried to edit out what we can. If there is anything remaining, then we do apologise. But in the meantime, thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.